Ladies and gentlemen, living in a democratic country gives us most right to the most things. However, till this day, there are still issues regarding the other liberty rights, corruption, operation, abuse of power, rights to vote, and so on. Such matters are still a hot debate to the public. A democratic government gives its people the opportunity to elect a government every 5 years as an alternative to build a developed country and to show that everyone has rights in choosing the party that they think is best in handling the governance. Despite that, there are still plenty of crucial issues that need to be tackled immediately. Therefore, this program will talk to those matters and possibly come up with a variety of solutions, suggestions, and ideas on how to overcome such problems. Such ideas are also based on the panelists' experience and knowledge in the political field. Before we begin our forum session tonight, I believe it is best if we first get to know all of our speakers. So please allow me to introduce our amazing speakers who have had various splendid achievements throughout their careers. Our first panelist is someone who has contributed his expertise as a public intellectual locally and internationally. In UUM, he was the Director of Research and Innovation Management Center from 2017 until 2018. As for international level, he was awarded with fellowship grants and appointed as visiting fellow in the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies ISIS in Singapore back in 2014. Also in the same year, he was appointed as visiting professor at the National Institute of Development and Administration in Bangkok, Thailand. Now he is visiting at Chang Professor for the School of Liberal Arts and Science, Tellers University, Malaysia, where he is also a research fellow for the Center for Testing, Measurement and Evaluation, University Utara, Malaysia. Please welcome Professor Dr. Muhammad Azizuddin Muhammad Sani. I'm glad to introduce our second speaker for our program. He was an assistant to the executive director of Milwaukee Community Service Corps in Wisconsin, USA. Years later, he was a Fulbright teaching fellow Martapura in South Kalimantan, Indonesia, back in July 2007 until May 2008. He also has various international collaboration, for instance, teaching modules for Kyoto University of Foreign Studies, KUFS, in 2019. Our speaker is an active member in university and community services, where he participated as the coordinator, advisor, co-advisor, and many more. Also, he is the honorary secretary and exco member, Aliran, which is a peace and social justice organization Penang, Malaysia, from then until this day. Furthermore, he had become one of the most invited speakers to a forum. As a guest lecturer, even was engaged by the public and media in regards to political matters. Now, he is the senior lecturer for School of Social Science in University Science Malaysia, Penang. Let's welcome Dr. Azmil Muhammad Taib. Now, that all of our speakers are introduced, without further ado, we will now start our discussion. All right, so Professor and Doctor. So the first question is for Professor Azizuddin. Talking about the democracy system in our country, comparing the early days of Malaysia to the current Malaysia, are we getting further or nearer to the ideal democracy, and why? Yes, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much, Najia, as a moderator. And hopefully you can hear me clearly over there. Yeah, that's great.
Yes, Prof.
Okay, yeah. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to the organizer, Moon, UUM, Model United Nations Association, for inviting me to this session. And also at the same time, I think when talk about democracy, I also put a link to your chat box, which is I invited actually all voters, electorates for Kedah, in Kedah, to fill in the form, because I'm conducting research right now about election sentiments of Kedahan to the GE15. So if you are Kedahan and voters in Kedah, then I think you can fill in the form and also help me to get the enough numbers of samples. Okay, come back to your question just now. And uh, when it comes to when it comes to democracy, if you talk about ideal democracy, uh, is something that I think is difficult to explain because for me, there's no such thing as ideal democracy. Because democracy, if you look closely as a theory and also as a system of politics, actually it's not favorable to many scholars. So, for example, if you read Plato and also Aristotle, the the classical discussion on politics, both actually of these scholars really skeptical about democracy because they see democracy unable to help to build sustainable and also a stable government because democracy actually require everybody to participate. Okay, to say these things, uh, actually, what Plato and Aristotle meant by democracy actually direct democracy, which is participation directly, people in decision making. So that's the idea behind that. So produced by a human being, you know. So if I mention here, probably you will be surprised because it's not Westerners or Western scholars. Actually, the Islamic scholars, by the name of Al-Farabi. So Al-Farabi is the first person who study about Plato, Aristotle, and argue against Aristotle, saying that democracy is the best system ever created by human being. And he said that it can bring happiness to the people because people can express themselves to the government, and government should listen to the people, and government perform their duty to the people, and also that create happiness to the society. So I think that's just very interesting. I'm suggesting to you, probably any of you interested, probably you can refer to Al-Farabi, because the idea of Farabi later on, being followed and accepted by scholars like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, uh, Charles Condat del Montesquieu. These people who, for example, Montesquieu, is the people who, sorry, okay, Montesquieu, for example, is the people was the one who about the separation of power between executive, legislative, and judiciary. So that's, I think, the background of when we talk about ideal democracy. Even though Islamic scholars and more modern scholars arguing that probably democracy is the best compared to the other system that ever created so far, like communism, socialism, the monarchy, monarchy system, whatever. But still, I think it's difficult for us to argue about ideal democracy in the context of whatever countries that we can see to happen. So then I think, okay, what we can define of democracy? Democracy, actually you can argue in many ways. Some say it's about people's power. Scholars like what Robert Dahl talk about procedural process. Uh, Joseph Semputer, for example, talk about decision making. Samuel Huntington talk power. So there are many interpretation and also definition of democracy. But the most important thing is about democracy for me. There are two things. The most important thing. One is the ability of self-government, meaning that we can choose who in the government and government. Another thing is participation. Point number two is participation. People participation in politics. So we have political freedom in the countries, media freedom, where media can be a civil society and also can be a mediator for the government, for the people, and also when come back to our context of Malaysia, we actually are new countries, new democratic countries. In fact, we used to be a monarchy. you know, if you happen to attend my class, probably I can explain to you how Malaysia been formed from multi-country into a single country. When we establish a super state, countries. So that's become Malaysia. That and somehow, in order to get independence, we abolished the monarchy system and we accepted the British system based on Westminster system, and also we implement parliamentary, system together with constitutional monarchy. That's the thing that we define about our democracy. So since the independence, 1957 until today, actually there's an up and down in our democracy, but we never fail actually to have election every 5 years. Some 4 years, but in the others 5 years. And the only thing is that the last election in 2018 is the first time that we can see a change of power in the federal level, which is make it interesting, because previously always in the government was either Perikatan and later on Barisan Nasional. So the last election, we see there's a change of power to Pakatan Harapan, but somehow Pakatan Harapan collapsed. So now Perikatan Nasional and also Barisan Nasional came back into power. So, but the reality is that we can argue many ways about Malaysian democracy. I think later on, probably further discussion, probably we can go in depth in this context. But in reality, people around the world now today, particularly United States, see us as a democratic state. Compared to previous, meaning that prior to 2018, they see us as a like pseudo democracy, or some like William Case call us pseudo democracy or semi democracy, or scholars like Harold Crouch say about soft authoritarian. But somehow now already people in the world, around the world, democracy around the world recognized as a democratic state. Okay, however, we are not liberal states. That's, I think, something, if you want to go deeper, probably we can discuss about it. We are not a liberal states, liberal democratic states, but we are illiberal democratic states, which is some elements of local values, local perspective being applied in the context of Malaysian democracy. So I think probably I start with that first. Later on we can go further to discuss. Sorry about my screen suddenly freeze. I try to rectify the problem. So go back to you, Deja.
Thank you so much, Professor. So we could hear from Professor that there's a lot of things that actually Professor has come up to see that the Malaysia is actually the democratic countries has been seen by United States of America, also ratified us as a democratic country. And also we can see that when we talk about the ideal democracy, professor advises us to see that how Al-Farabi see the how Al-Farabi see this democracy is ideal, somehow is better than the other system right now. So we could see that as what Professor said, that Malaysia is currently in a illiberal democratic state, which is local perspective has applied to the countries, to the system as well. So continue with the next question. We will see about in depth this kind of democratic system in our country. So moving on to our next speaker, Dr. Azmil. Living in a democratic country gives us the liberty in making choices. From your point of view, what is the significance of democracy compared to other forms of government, Doctor?
Okay. Assalamualaikum and good night to all the participants in this webinar. And thank you to Model UN Club at UUM for inviting me as one of the speakers. Yes, I think for democracy, of course, it's not perfect, as some of the flaws that Prof. Azizuddin mentioned earlier, right? So there is no perfect system as we know of today, right? So only maybe the best one that we have, right? So and in comparison to other forms of political system, monarchy, authoritarianism, military junta, or theocracy, other forms. Democracy is still the best compared to all these, forms of political system, right? Um, back to your question about choices, right? So when we look at the word democracy itself, right? I mean, the etymology of the word democracy, you break it down into, demos, which is people, right? And then kratia, which is rule of, right? So basically, the people making decisions that can determine the type of society they want, right? The type of governance they want, who they want to lead them, right, in the society. So that, in very essence, the definition of democracy, right? But also, as Prof. Azizuddin mentioned earlier, the classical view, like Plato and Socrates, they didn't look favorably on democracy, precisely because a major weakness in democracy is the people itself. So even though democracy can be empowering to people, but the people also can be the downfall of democracy, right? Because the way that Plato and Socrates see democracy as being vulnerable to populism, being vulnerable to someone who can be a demagogue. I mean, that's the word that he used. If you read Plato's The Republic, so a demagogue is this charismatic figure who can use emotions um, to gain support from the public. Right? Oh, sorry, my cat just jumped on my my table and spilled. Okay. So. Okay, so there's two sides to democracy. So one, it can be empowering to people because it allows people the power to make decisions for their own lives instead of being determined by a group of elites, for example. But at the same time, people can be also vulnerable to be exploited by this demagogue figure, this charismatic figure who comes on the scene and then able to rile up people's emotions, um, to make them to turn them into mob violence, for example. So when Plato talks about democracy, is only one step away um, from from anarchy, basically. So and the analogy that he makes and Socrates makes is that when you have a ship, right, or maybe or an airplane, for example, right? So you want someone who's specially trained in sailing the ship or flying the airplane to take you to your destination, right? So you don't want, as much as you love your friend, you trust your friend, but you don't want your friend to be flying the airplane, right? When you on the airplane, right? I mean, I love my friends too, but I don't trust my friend who is not a pilot to fly the airplane, right? So that's the analogy that Socrates and Plato make, right? Say like, so why should the political system be any different? Why why should democracy be led by people who are illiterate, people who are not well trained in politics, in the art of governance, um, who might be acting against their own best interests? So the argument that Plato and Socrates make is that democracy, political system should be led by a group of people who are well trained in the art of governance, what he calls the philosopher kings, right? So to be trained from such a young age, the chosen ones, the bright and um, the best and the brightest, chosen to lead the country, trained for many years to be uncorrupted, to forego self-interest for the sake of collective interests. And these are the people who should be leading the political system, not the people. So that's basically the argument. But of course, I mean, right now we have democracy is the main political system that we have around the world, right? Not just in Malaysia, because it has been proven that it is the best system that we have right now, despite all the flaws. And even the vulnerabilities that Plato and Socrates mentioned thousands of years ago, we can still see them today, right? So we can see there is a wave of democratic regression going on around the world right now, right? We can see this in Western Europe, for example. We can see this in Southeast Asia, how democracy is receding, right? Retreating. Yeah, so backsliding, another term for it. Yeah, so because of this vulnerability to populism, we can see this in the Philippines, for example, when Rodrigo Duterte came to power, right? So we can see this in Thailand. You can even see this in Indonesia, how President Jokowi consolidates its power, using, populist strategies. So we can see the vulnerability still exists. So I guess the challenge now is how to resist, this backsliding, how that we people can stand guard and safeguard, I guess, these democratic ideals, and to protect them from being exploited by unscrupulous people, demagogues, and the likes, and further, I guess, improve the quality of democracy, which I think we can go a bit deeper later on. But one thing I like to say is that there is no black and white when it comes to democracy, right? So I think one way to look at it is to look at democracy on a spectrum. If you put democracy on a spectrum, right? So you have a spectrum, this linear line, right? A horizontal line. So on one end, you have authoritarianism, right? A purely non-democratic system. And then on the other end, you have um, a matured democracy, or the technical term used in political science is consolidated democracy, right? At the other end of the spectrum. So democracies around the world basically move along this spectrum. Sometimes it can progress towards consolidated democracy, and at some other time it will regress back towards authoritarianism, right? So it moves along the spectrum. And so I think that's a more useful way of seeing democracy, right? Because society change, the political situation change. Nothing is constant, nothing is static, right? We can see in Malaysia itself, we have so many examples how our democracy move, backwards and forwards. Yeah, so um, we can see that, like, the democracy index, right, in Malaysia after the 2018 election, Malaysia moved up, quite a bit, the ranks. So basically Malaysia is seen as democratizing, as moving towards democratic consolidation, right? Because now we have a competitive two-party system, so we have this peaceful transfer of power in Malaysia. But then Sheraton move happened, and then the instability that was going on during the pandemic, and then showed Malaysia sliding back again, right? So this constant moving back and forth. So to me, it's best seen, if you put democracy on the spectrum, right? So that's again one point that I want to make. Um, and also, I think there's another misconception that we hear a lot, right? So democracy is majority rule. Um, I mean, it's not. If you look at the criteria for consolidated democracy, right? So it's, when you see a matured consolidated democracy means that means more than just majoritarian rule, right? So it doesn't give the right for the majority to rule over the minority. So a consolidated democracy means that there has to be respect for minority rights, for example, to take into consideration other points of views, even those who don't support you, right? To be more inclusive. So that's what it means to be a consolidated democracy, which of course that's the ideal, right? So when we compare to the real world, that doesn't necessarily happen, right? So I like to end my response there. So maybe we can delve deeper into all these different criteria of democracy and democratic practices later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We could see that Professor and also Doctor sees that democratic is not a perfect system, but that's the best one we have currently. Even though in not only in Malaysia, but we could see in this world as well. So we're moving on to the next question, which is now back to Professor Azizuddin. As we are all aware of the new system, where youth have the right of voting, but at the same time, there are other parties who see this matter as concerning due to the youth's lack of understanding towards politics, particularly parties that they are going to vote for. So the matter in regards to Undi 18, would it have a huge impact on democracy, Prof? Prof, you are muted, Prof.
Okay, can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay,
Sure, Prof.
sorry. Yeah, I think this is a big issue right now. I think it's related to most of you as a new voter. And even though you can see the debate saying that uh, the youth, particularly the age between 18 to 20, is not matured enough to know about politics and to vote in the election. That's probably the perception of many elderly people about the youth. However, recently I engaged with several youth with Institute Darul Rizwan in Perak. When I engage during my engagement with them, I asked several questions, and also when I asked them, whether you are going to vote in the next coming election. I think more than half say they don't want to vote. So it surprised me, and I asked them why this happened. So what they told me is that they're concerned about two things. Mostly about two things. One, actually, they see the burden of them. This is the youth between age 18 to 20. They see the burden that they have to choose the government. So is one of the biggest, I think, probably the biggest task that given to them to do, which is never being asked to them to do before, during school time. uh, so for them is a burden. So they're scared about that role to choose a government. So second actually is about they say that another the problem is that also they don't know who to choose, which party to choose. So for them, it's all party almost the same. So we don't know, they don't know which one is better than the others. So that's why it makes them even scary to choose who's the government. So I think probably it is a perspective of them when they when in the case of us, we are lacking in political education at the school level. So that I think the main issue which I think need to be tackled by the government of today, because the lack of education, political education in the school level. So okay, that's I think one of the point. But when come back to the issue of the 18 and 20 age of youth should not be allowed to vote. I think if we stick with our old practices, we need 21 years old, then can be allowed to vote. I think probably we are we are lacking, meaning that we are leaving behind by other democracy, because other democracy already changed the system to allow youth at the age of 18 to vote. I think in the most of the countries, even in South Asia, I think almost all countries, even Indonesia also, they allow for their citizen age 17 to vote. Because the more and more people being exposed to democracy, the more they can make their own decision. And many of the young generation now, they know, and they know themselves, and also they have their own opinion, and their opinion also about what's best, which the government is the best, who can lead the government, something like that. So that's why I think the trend is moving towards allowing more useful youth at the age, particularly age 18 to vote. I know Singapore still maintain their decision on age 31. In fact, through my searching about the age of voting, I think country the highest is 26 years old. I think in Bahrain, if not mistaken. So meaning that the trend of the world now towards age 18 as the lowest age to vote. Even though some countries allow even lower than that. So I think for me it's good for democracy to allow young people to participate in election. Okay, whether they can give significant impact to our democracy, for me, probably very small impact to our democracy, particularly during the election. Because if you look on the current statistic by the election commission, the youth age 18 to 20, because they once you get the age 18, automatically be registered where register to where you are registered in your ICs. So if you registered your address in Jitra, for example, so meaning that you're going to vote in Dun Jitra and Parliament Kubang Pasu, so automatically being registered. So between the age 18 and 20, only around 5 to 6% of young voters that automatically can vote. So meaning that yes, you can give a significant impact to constituency that probably the marginal of voting is small, between parties, but in the role, meaning that the whole impact, meaning that nationwide. So probably the significance is not there. However, another point that I want to make, which I think makes young voters, only 18, become significant, is because of our party system now in Malaysia. We used to see that we have one dominant party system during Barisan Nasional Perikatan before. Then after the last general election, we see a two-party system. Then suddenly crumble. Now become three-party system when we have BN, PN, and PH. Then recently, Tun Mahathir also announced about GTA. I don't know whether there is going to be, a new, front, a new coalition. Even though Tun Mahathir said that it's not a new coalition, it's just a movement, to contest in the election. So I know we're not sure yet what kind of party system that we practice in Malaysia, but definitely it's a multi-party system. Okay, when a multi-party system, the chances of one party to get simple majority is difficult in everywhere around the world. So even though we can say that okay, Barisan Nasional probably in the lead right now, because they won in many state election, particularly Johor and Melaka. But if you study closely in Johor and Melaka, I agree with our fellow panelists saying that it's not democracy is not so much about majority, even though we counted the majority seats, but not really about majority because the number of percentage won by Barisan Nasional is very low. Just I think I'm missed out a bit about these two states. I think around 80 to 25% of the votes. I think in Johor is about less than 20, about 18, but in I think in Malacca is slightly higher. So if I'm not mistaken, so meaning that the percentage to win the vote is just less than 25%, meaning that to win the election. In fact, Barisan Nasional won the election by 2/3. So that's also very interesting fact. And if undi 18, voters came, definitely they can give a significant impact if they all go for votes in the election. Meaning they can swing the vote in certain constituency. So that's why I think it's very significant for them to contest. The only thing is even though we practice automatic voting and also undi 18, but we didn't practice compulsory voting like several countries like Singapore and also in Australia. So because of that, I think probably most of the only 18 voters will not turn out in voting. That's I suspect what's going to happen. So back to your question just now, I think the impact is there, but very small impact in the election. So I think political party, if they want only 18 to give significant impact in the election, I think they have to lure these people to go out and vote. In fact, probably can allow some of their leaders, probably younger leaders, to contest in the election as well. So that's probably my view. About undi 18, and probably we can discuss after this further after this about this thing. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Professor. So we could hear that Professor do say that most of the undi 18 or most of the youth is quite afraid to vote if there's another election, which is a G15 in the future, because they're afraid that what kind of parties that they're going to vote, because they're not confident enough, because there's a lot of parties nowadays, which is been explained about the multi-party system right now in Malaysia. So we could see what Professor said, that there's a good for democracy by having the undi 18 or youth participating in the democracy system. However, it just have a small impact could be seen if this undi 18 is participating in this kind of democracy system, unless they are going to vote for another election soon. So we continue to the next question, which is that we going to ask the question for Professor Azizuddin as well. This time around, if I may, Prof,
Okay.
Malaysia has been blessed with numerous cultures, ethnicities, and religions, but there are still issues on how some of these minorities are not being heard enough, which brings to me the question, does democracy undermine the voices of minorities? Is it true or the other way around, Prof?
I think this is I think this is a debate I think go on regarding probably there's a concern on minorities, whether their grievances, their demands being heard, by the government. I think if you look in our history, actually many of their concern, their demand actually being heard by the government. In fact, if you look on the history of when Malaysia was established, when 130 proposal submitted to the Red Commission, so all the proposals are coming from many groups, political parties, and actually the British back then listened to the demand, and through our compromise, so we agree to share the power with all races. That's why during that period, we talk about Malaysian system is really a system that practices consociational politics, meaning that in Malay, we call it politik pemufakatan. So meaning that between political parties, they are representing, their ethnic groups, then from there they can have discussion, compromise, and can make policy that can be agreed by everybody. So even though we not really practice fully constitutional politics, or constitutional democracy based on life, I would say that we practice a modified kind of constitutional politics. So because certain element of constitutional politics, such as uh, you know uh, election system must be proportional representation, but we never practice. We practice actually, first past the post system. So meaning that simple majority system when one vote enough to win the election or one chair enough to win the government. So I think that's reality exists because of the you know you know discussion consensus among this political leader, and from there we can be able to make the government stable. So I think in the case, I think that's also you can see why as well our system still based on race-based system. When we have race-based party until today, even though they are multiracial party, but we can see clearly that there's a dominant of one political ethnic group in that party. So I think that's all the original coming from the beginning actually. But when talk about new economic policy, even though Chinese, for example, back then feel they disagree with the implementation, but later on they also see that the benefit that they can get, meaning that they can compromise. But lately, I think the issue is that mostly I think related to economy. When we have economic problem, then issue of race also emerge, or ethnicity emerge, because seems that there's a not enough perspective, or compromise that we can give, because the supply is very limited but the demand is too many. That's the analogy I can give. So that's why some minority feel that they're being sidelined, even though the reality is that there's not enough supply to the economic opportunity in the country. So because of that, there seems a problem with this. And when talk about minority, you can say also in terms of race and ethnicity, but also you can say in terms of group. So now the new group emerge, demanding things which I think not acceptable to our society. For example, in the case of LGBT group. So I think there are many issues where the government need to deal with the situation. Not to mention issue of Sabah Sarawak. Sabah Sarawak also there are issue of tanah adat, for example, land issue of based on what I try to observe in Sabah Sarawak, because they know that the federal government depending on them, in many things, for power, for voting in parliament and everything. So that's why they demand more to the government, then the government somehow to compromise to them, So that's why they want to get more autonomy in the sense of that, So there, I think I'm not saying that minority have problems in Malaysia, in general. Of course, there's few big things that they feel, they're being sidelined or marginalized, for example, the Indian community or Rasli. But still, I think I can see that, there's a room for discussion and compromise between the whole society in Malaysia. Compared to other countries, if you compare to other countries when certain community probably being removed, and I think how the Muslim, for example, be marginalized in a Western country like France, I think is really evident. You can see in your eyes, and in many other countries as well. So I think uh, the more we progress in democracy, the more we can see actually this kind of station and demands, and the best way we can deal with all these things actually, if we have a government which is stable, then I can engage with all the communities in order to find the solutions for everything. Because you can imagine, we have I don't know how many ethnic group that we have in Malaysia. Everybody have their own demands, so that's why I think it's not easy to organize a democracy in any countries. That's the most important is to have lot of engagement, lot of meaning that the policy must be representing everybody, But at the same time, so we, everybody also must understand our constitution, which I think we have so certain protection on the majority people, meaning that the Malays and the Bumiputras under Article 153. So that's why I think the reality of Malaysia needs to be understood by everybody. So when everybody understand, then I think easily we can overcome any of our problem, which is can be find a solution for that, But of course, like I mentioned to you, is what we can see what happened today is most related to economic factor, and then as long as we continue to facing economic problem, then I think this issue of race and probably religion as well can be one of the concern in the country. So go back to you, Kak. Nadia.
Okay, terima kasih, Professor. Thank you so much. So we could see that what Professor said is like, we need to have a compromise and understanding the Constitution first. In regards to policy, we must be representing everybody in order to make sure that it's equal to our minorities. Especially, we could see that a lot of issues happen currently in Malaysia, including Sabah Sarawak issues, especially when the government is also depends on them in many things. So let's jump into another question. So before we proceed to Dr. Azmil, so before we continue, to those participants who have any question to be asked, you may type in the comment section below, and your question will be answered during the Q&A session after this. Okay, so let's continue back to our current discussion. Going on with our next experienced speaker, Dr. Azmil. Now, Doctor, I believe we all agree that every news today is so easy and fast to spread whether the information is valid or not, which brings to my concern, does social media have either a good or bad impact on democracy, particularly in Malaysia, Doctor?
Okay. Yes. In this day and age, pretty much everyone gets their news from social media, right? I mean, me included. So it's something that's inevitable. It's ingrained in lives. So the question now is how to best utilize social media, right? So one way to look at social media, especially in the political context, is to see it as a tool, right? um, like any other tool, for example, a knife, right? So a knife can be used for a good purpose or for a bad purpose, right? It's a value neutral tool, so it depends on the intent of what you're using it for. So you can use a knife to cut fish, for example, to cook, right? Which is a good use of a knife, right? But at the same time, you can use the knife to stab someone, right? So which is not a very good use of a knife. Right? So I guess the same with social media too, right? So depending on how you use it, and by the same time, you also have to be aware of the power that social media have over our lives, right? I mean, this is something that we are so consumed with social media that we don't realize that the kind of impact that it has on your life and how it shapes your opinion, how it tracks your behavior, and things like that. I mean, I'm sure, like there are quite a few shows on Netflix you can watch, on this detrimental impact of social media, right? Or there's another term for it, it's called surveillance capitalism, for example, right? So how the data that they collect from your use of social media, right? When you play those games on social media, all these, little apps, and this is one way for them to track, to collect the data and then use it. Facebook would use it to sell to third parties, or to political parties, for example. If you still remember back in, I think, 2017, 2018, before the election, there was a scandal, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, right? Where the then BN government used, some of the contracted, I guess, the service of this consulting firm that manipulate the data that they get from Facebook, right? To somewhat shape public opinions. Yeah. So I guess For us, I mean, me included as well, because I'm also a consumer of social media, is that, we have to be conscious, right? On how we use social media, for example. I mean, of course, I mean, on the positive side, um, you have social media having a democratizing effect, right? So it opens up access to people who might not have similar access to traditional media, like newspaper or TV or radio and things like that, right? But social media opens up access, because if you have smartphone, then you can have access to social media, right? And smartphones these days are relatively affordable, right? You can go to any kampungs, you can find some pakcik, having smartphone, right? So it's no longer, only for the elites, but for the marhayan people as well can have access to smartphone and hence social media, right? Like for example, you could like Arab Springs, for what happened in Egypt, in Tunisia, when that happened, the people were able to post, the what's going on, right? The what's happening on the streets in real time, so they can post videos, and that gives exposure, to what's going on in real time, right? And it gives them, it the kind of publicity, that they would not otherwise get from mainstream media, right? Especially in an authoritarian regime where the media is strictly controlled by the government. So social media has this kind of democratizing effect, right? So it helps with the Arab Springs revolution. It topples government. You can see in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya. I mean, even though the end result might not be democracy in most of these countries, but it does, at least in the beginning, right? You can see it empowers the people to expose the corrupt regime, for example. Um, but on the flip side, so you have the negative of social media, right? Like I mentioned, your data can be manipulated by the political parties or government. We also have, because now social media becoming a battleground, right? So if you're a political party, if you're a government, regardless on which side of the political divide you stand, um, you will be at a serious disadvantage if you don't engage in social media. I mean, that's the reality that we have right now, right? So all political parties, I mean, they all have very widespread social media presence, right? So because that's the reality of the world we're living in right now. So that means that a lot of strategies and dirty tactics used, right, in social media to help shape public opinions and to shut down opposing views, right? So one example, you can see the use of trolls. You can see a lot of times, right, in the comment section, you see all these fake accounts, right, posting favorable views of, certain parties or whatever, right? And then when you click on, the account, it shows like a profile picture of a cat or something like that, right? So it's a fake account, So this is what's going on. The cyber warfare, right? Using of bots in Twitter, for example, right? To amplify certain messages so that it becomes more publicized and becomes it becomes legitimized, right? It becomes more acceptable to the general public. So that's one of the ways as well. Um, and also the use of algorithm, right, in social media, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, for example, um, because that's the way they track your consumption behavior on social media, right? Because they see what you like, and then they show more of what you like, right, in your newsfeed. I don't know if you notice that, right? So if you like, certain types of news or certain friends posts on Facebook, and Facebook will keep showing you that, or something similar to that, right? So when it comes to political news, if you like certain political news, and Facebook will give you similar political news like that. So in a way, that creates what in political science they call echo chamber, right? So when you like in a room and when you talk, right? So there's echo, gema, right? So and that's what's happening in social media because you're only speaking to yourself and you're only listening to views that you want to hear, right? It's a type of cognitive bias, right? So so in a way, you're not exposed to other points of views on social media because of this algorithm. I mean, it's not the algorithm fault per se, right? Because it only gives you what it thinks that you want, right? So like, oh, you like this, I give you more of this, right? So, but I think it's incumbent upon you to actually to be more aware of the algorithm and then to diversify your news consumption on social media, right? To have different types of news sources, right? So that it's a way to get around the algorithm in social media, right? So, and then I think another downside of social media is, I mean, not necessarily downside, I guess, but it can be both ways. The information overload that you get, right? Because you go from before. I don't know if any of you remember the time before social media, before internet. Maybe you're too young to remember those times. Like Prof and I, we still remember those Stone Age time where people don't have internet and social media. So back then information was restrictive. We have to work hard to acquire information, read newspapers, right? But these days, at your fingertip, you can get any information you want, right? I mean, too much information. So information overload, right? So and then it creates a new problem. Like how do you filter through this flood of information? How do you verify which one is trustworthy and which one is not, right? So I guess that comes with political education. These days when you have political education, you need to include social media literacy as well, to help people to sift through, this sea of information that we have on social media, on the internet, for example, not to just um, take whatever's there, just someone writes a blog on the internet and then say, oh, you can use that as an authoritative source of information, which is not, right? So which only happens, like because I teach, and then my students use some person's blog or use Wikipedia, for example, as a source. So there's I think there's has to be social media literacy program, in schools, for example, in university, at least, to teach young people, especially, how to use. I guess not just young people, even like old people are also guilty of misusing social media and internet, right? So I think it's really important in this day and age. So I think I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It's interesting when you said about, yeah, social media. You use the analogy of knife as a social media is one thing that could easily absorb, and how this actually social media could impact in many things, especially to see if we like that kind of news. And of course, the timeline will also be that kind of the same, exactly that kind of news. So it's hard is actually to get the other information. So how important the social media literacy, political literacy educations to probably that the government need to be find out the best policy for the young people, and of course to the old people that also use the social media now. So we jump into the next question. Another question also I bid for Dr. Azmil is that Perhimpunan Aman, or commonly known as protest, rally, and demonstration, should it be allowed in a democratic country or not? And does the government really have power to instruct the police on preventing any kind of protests from happening, Doctor?
Yes, I think it should and must be allowed. as part of the democratic rights of every citizens here, in not just in Malaysia, but any democratic country, right? I mean, again, you cannot call yourself a democracy if you don't allow people to gather peacefully and air out their grievances, right? But the key word here is aman, right? So perhimpunan aman, right? So as long as it's civil, it's peaceful, then it should be part and parcel of the democratic process itself, right? So one of the rights of citizens living in a democracy. Yeah. Okay, ada selingan sekejap. Okay. So I think for several reasons, right? That why peaceful assembly, the freedom for to gather and to express your political opinions is important in democracy. I mean, one is of course you want the government to know, to be aware of whatever issues that you're advocating or your group is advocating, right? Especially when other channels of for you to express your opinion have been shut down or not available or highly restricted, right? So this is what we're talking about in a country that not fully democratic, maybe authoritarian countries, where the people are official channels, let's say through the parliament, for example, things like that highly restricted or restricted or shut, right? So the only way for people to express their opinions, their grievances, their problems, their issues, to take it out to the streets, right? And another reason is to bring awareness to whatever issue that they're advocating, right? So because that's one way to, when you see a protest, is usually, it creates some kind of quote unquote disturbance, I guess. It's a good kind of disturbance because when there is a something like that, then people take note, right? Take notice, I guess. They say, hey, what's happening over there? And then they look and then they say, oh, and then they can learn something about the issue that's being advocated. So it raises consciousness, brings awareness, to whatever issues at hand, right? So I think it's just one of the ways, that people can participate in democracy, because I guess, when like democracy is not just about voting every 5 years or 4 years or whatever. So that's a basic requirement of a democracy. But to be an active citizen in a democracy, you have to go beyond just voting, right? So this is so to me, the way I see protesting, rallying, or even like signing petitions or writing emails to your representative, to your wakil rakyat, or you attend town hall meetings, for example, to meet with your wakil rakyat to directly face to face, or and things like that, right? So these are all part of being an active citizen in a democracy. So so if you ask me, then yes, I think it is. But as I've also mentioned, the keyword is aman, right? So but once it descends into chaos, into property destruction or violence or death or things like that, then it becomes uncivil, right? And thus it becomes undemocratic, right? So and the second part of your question, if the government has the power to instruct the police, of course it does, right? I mean, that's part of the executive power to instruct the police to stop, to put a halt to any kind of rallies or protests. But to me, is it the question that we should be asking, is that democratic, right? If you call yourself a democratic country, is that a democratic way of doing things. So if the answer is no, then of course, I mean, that's not, then it is, yeah, the power is being abused, right? So yeah, so that's my response to your question.